My son's voice was nervous. He wanted me to meet his wife's wealthy parents. He asked me not to embarrass him, so I showed up pretending to be a poor, broken woman. What they did that night destroyed them, and they deserved every second of it. This is the story of how I revealed my true self. My son Marcus never knew the truth about me. He is 35 years old. To him I was just a mother. The woman who left for work early. The woman who came home tired. I cooked simple meals with whatever was in our fridge. I was just another employee, maybe a secretary, someone ordinary, nothing special. I never told him otherwise. I never told him I earned $40,000 every single month. I never told him I was a senior executive. I worked at a massive corporation for nearly 20 years. I signed contracts worth millions. I made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Why would I tell him? Money was not a trophy. I did not need to hang it on the wall. I grew up in a different time. Dignity was something you carried inside you. Silence was worth more than empty words. So I kept my truth locked away. It was my quiet secret. I lived in the same modest apartment for decades. The building was old. The rooms were small, but it was my home. It was comfortable. I used the same leather handbag for years. I carried it until the corners were worn and the color had faded. I bought my clothes at discount stores. I looked for sales. I never paid full price. I cooked every meal at home. I saved every dollar I could. I invested it all. I watched my wealth grow in silence, and I became rich. True power does not need to shout. It does not need to boast. True power watches. It observes. And I was observing very closely when Marcus called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. His voice sounded strange. I was nervous. It reminded me of when he was a little boy. He used that voice when he had done something wrong, or when he was about to ask for something he knew he shouldn't. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you for a favor." I waited. I knew this was not a simple request. "Simone's parents are visiting from overseas," he continued. Simone was his wife. "It's their first time here. They want to meet you. We're having dinner on Saturday. It's at a nice restaurant. Please, Mom, please come." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. It was a cold, sinking feeling. This was not the voice of a happy son. It was not the voice of a man excited to have his mother meet his in-laws. It was the voice of someone asking me not to embarrass him. He wanted to fit in. He needed to make a good impression. And he saw me as a problem, a potential source of shame. I kept my own voice calm. I smoothed over the sudden hurt. "Do they know anything about me?" I asked. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear his shallow breathing. He was struggling to find the right words. Finally he stammered. I told them you work in an office. I said you live alone. I told them you're simple, that you don't have much." There was that one single word. Simple. He had packed my entire life into that miserable little adjective. It was as if all my sacrifices, struggles, and victories meant nothing. I was just simple. I was a problem he had to apologize for in advance. My son saw me as a liability. A deep breath filled my lungs. I held it for a moment. I let the pain wash over me and then I let it go. I replaced it with something else. Something cold and hard. It was resolve. "Okay, Marcus," I said. My voice was even. "I'll be there." I hung up the phone. I looked around my living room. The furniture was old but comfortable. The walls were bare. There was no expensive artwork, just a few framed photos of Marcus as a child. A small television sat in the corner. Nothing in this room would impress anyone. Nothing screamed wealth. And in that moment I made a decision. If my own son thought I was a poor woman, then that's who I would be. If his wife's parents were coming to this country ready to judge me, I would give them a performance they would never forget. I would become the person they expected to see. I would pretend to be broke. I would act naive and desperate. I would be a mother barely surviving. I wanted to feel it myself. I wanted to see how they would treat someone they believed had nothing to offer. I wanted to see their true faces. I already had a suspicion. I suspected Simone and her wealthy family were the kind of people who measured a person's worth by the size of their bank account. I had met people like them my whole life in the corporate world. They were everywhere, and my instinct about people rarely fails. Saturday arrived, the day of the dinner. I went to my closet. I pushed past the simple, well-made clothes I wore to the office. I reached into the very back. I pulled out the worst outfit I owned. It was a light gray dress. It was shapeless and made of cheap fabric. It was wrinkled from being forgotten. It was the kind of dress you find at a thrift store for $1. I found a pair of old, worn-out shoes. The soles were thin. The leather was scuffed. I put them on. I wore no jewelry, not even a watch. I grabbed a faded canvas tote bag. It was old and frayed. I pulled my hair back into a messy ponytail. I didn't bother to smooth it down. I looked at myself in the mirror. A woman broken by life stared back at me. She looked tired. She looked forgettable. She looked perfect. I called a taxi. I gave the driver the address. It was a high-end restaurant. It was in the most exclusive part of the city. This was the kind of place where the menu doesn't show prices. If you have to ask, you can't afford it. Each fork, each knife, each plate on the table probably costs more than an average person's monthly salary. As the taxi moved through the city streets, a strange feeling washed over me. It was a mix of anticipation and sadness. I was anticipating the truth. I knew something big was about to happen. However, I also felt a deep sense of sorrow. A small part of me still hoped I was wrong. It was hoped they would be kind. I hoped they would treat me well. I hoped they would look past my old clothes and see the person underneath. But another part of me knew better. It was the part that had survived 40 years in the corporate world. It was the part that had dealt with sharks in expensive suits. That part of me knew exactly what was waiting. It knew there would be no kindness. The taxi stopped. I was in front of the restaurant. Warm lights glowed from inside. A doorman in pristine white gloves stood by the entrance. He opened doors for elegant people. They walked in without a second glance. I paid the driver. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. I took a deep breath. I crossed the threshold, and I entered their world. They were there, standing next to a long table near the windows. Marcus saw me first. He wore a dark suit, a crisp white shirt. His shoes were so shiny they reflected the light. He looked anxious. His eyes darted around the room. Beside him was Simone, my daughter-in-law. She wore a tailored cream dress. It had gold accents. She wore high heels. Her hair was perfectly straight. It fell over her shoulders like a sheet of dark silk. She looked impeccable as always, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking toward the entrance. Her expression was tense. It wasn't very comfortable. And then I saw her parents. They were already seated. They sat at the table like royalty on their thrones. The mother, Veronica, wore a fitted emerald green dress. It was covered in sequins that caught the light. Jewels sparkled on her neck, her wrists, and her fingers. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. She had a cold, calculated kind of beauty, the type that is meant to intimidate. Beside her was her husband, Franklin. He wore an immaculate gray suit. A giant, heavy watch was strapped to his wrist. His expression was severe. They both looked like they had stepped out of a luxury magazine. They looked untouchable. I started walking toward them. I strolled. I took short, hesitant steps. I acted as if I were afraid, as if this place was too much for me. Marcus finally saw me. His face changed instantly. His eyes widened in shock. He looked me up and down. His gaze lingered on my wrinkled dress and my worn-out shoes. I saw him swallow hard. "Mom," he said. His voice was tight. It was uncomfortable. You said you'd come." "Of course, son," I replied. I gave him a timid smile, the smile of a woman who was not used to places like this. "Here I am." Simone greeted me next. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. It was cold. It was mechanical. There was no warmth in it at all. "Mother-in-law," she said. "It's nice to see you." Her eyes told a different story. They said, "Why are you dressed like that?" She introduced me to her parents. Her tone was strange. It was almost apologetic. "Dad, Mom, this is Marcus's mother, Alara." Veronica looked up from her menu. He studied me. And in that single silent moment I saw everything. I saw the judgment. I saw the disdain. I saw the pure, unfiltered disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress. They moved to my old shoes. They landed on my faded canvas tote bag. She didn't say a word at first. She just extended a hand across the table. Her handshake was cold. It was quick and weak. "A pleasure," she said. Her voice was flat. Franklin did the same. Another weak handshake. A false smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Charmed," he muttered. I sat down. They had placed a chair for me at the very end of the table. It was the one furthest from them. I was seated like a second-class guest. An afterthought. No one helped me with my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. I was invisible. A waiter arrived. He was dressed in a starched white jacket. He handed us the menus. They were heavy and elegant, bound in dark leather. The text was written in French. I opened mine. I pretended not to understand a single word. I held it close to my face, squinting, my expression one of complete confusion. Veronica was watching me. Her eyes were like a hawk's. He never missed a thing. "Do you need some help with the menu, Alara?" she asked. A small, tight smile played on her lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh yes, please," I said. I made my voice sound small and timid. "I don't know what these words mean." She sighed. It was a theatrical, put-upon sound. "I'll order for you," she announced to the table. She looked at me. "Something simple," she roared. "Something that doesn't cost too much. We don't want to overdo it." The phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. Franklin nodded his agreement. Marcus looked away, staring at the floor. Simone began to fold and refold her napkin, her eyes fixed on her own hands. No one said a word. No one defended me, and I just watched. I observed their silence. told me everything I needed to know. Veronica started the conversation. She began by discussing general topics. She complained about the long journey from her country. She mentioned how tiring the flight was. She remarked on how different everything was here. Then she subtly shifted the topic. She began to talk about money. She mentioned the five-star hotel where they were staying. $8,000 a night, she said, sighing as if it were a burden. She noted the luxury car they had rented. It was the only thing suitable, obviously, she added. She talked about the designer stores they had visited that afternoon. We bought a few things, she said, waving a dismissive hand. Nothing major. Just a few $1,000s worth. She spoke while looking directly at me. She was expecting a reaction. He wanted me to be impressed. He wanted me to feel small. I just nodded. I kept my expression blank. How nice, I said softly. That's lovely, she continued, now in her element. You know, Alara, we've always been cautious with our money. We worked hard. We invested well. Now we have properties in 3 different countries. Franklin has major businesses and I oversee our investments. She smiled with pure superiority. She looked at me, her head tilted. And you, Alara? What is it exactly that you do? Her tone was sickly sweet, but her question was a venomous dart. I work in an office, I replied. I lowered my gaze, pretending to be ashamed. I do a little bit of everything. Paperwork, filing, simple things. Veronica exchanged a look with Franklin. It was a quick, knowing glance. Ah, I see, she said. Administrative work. That's fine. It's honest. All jobs are dignified, right? The last part was a question, but it felt like a statement of judgment. Of course, I replied. The food arrived. The plates were enormous. The portions were tiny. Everything was decorated like a piece of modern art. Veronica cut into her small piece of steak with practiced precision. This steak costs $80, she announced to no one in particular. But it's worth every penny. Quality is something worth paying for. One can't just eat anything, can one? She looked at me as she said it. I nodded. Of course, you're right. Marcus tried to change the subject. He started talking about his work. He mentioned a new project he was excited about. Veronica interrupted him without a second thought. Son, she said, turning her attention back to me. Does your mother live alone? Marcus nodded, his expression tight. Yes, she has a small apartment. Veronica looked at me with a face full of feigned pity. It must be so difficult, isn't it, Alara? Living all alone at your age? Without much support. She paused. And does your salary cover everything? I felt the trap closing in. I barely replied. My voice was a whisper. I manage. I save where I can. I don't need much. Veronica sighed again, this time with even more drama. Oh, Alara, you are so brave. Truly, I admire women who struggle all on their own. She paused, letting her words sink in. Although, of course, one always wishes to give our children more. To give them a better life. But, oh well. Everyone gives what they can. There was the subtle but deadly blow. She was telling me I hadn't been enough for my son. She was saying I hadn't given him what he deserved. She was calling me a poor, insufficient mother. Simone stared at her plate, her face pale. Marcus's hands were clenched into tight fists under the table. And I just smiled. My timid practice smile. Yes, I said. You're right. Everyone gives what they can. Veronica continued her performance. She was relentless. We always made sure Simone had the best of everything, she declared, her voice filled with maternal pride. She went to the best private schools. She traveled the world with us. She learned to speak 4 languages. She glanced at Simone. Now she has an excellent job. She earns a very good salary. And when she decided to marry Marcus, well, we helped them quite a bit. She leaned forward as if sharing a grand secret. We gave them the money for the down payment on their house. We paid for their honeymoon. She smiled. A benefactor granting favors to the less fortunate. Because that's just who we are. We believe in supporting our children. She paused, then turned her cold eyes back to me. The final, sharp question was delivered with surgical precision. And you, Alara? Were you able to help Marcus with anything when they got married? The question hung in the air like a sharp knife. It was designed to cut, to expose my supposed poverty, to highlight my failure as a mother. Not much, I replied softly. I gave them what I could, a small gift. Veronica smiled, her victory complete. How sweet, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Every little detail counts, right? The amount doesn't matter. It's the intention that's important. And right then, in that moment, I felt the rage begin to stir inside me. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was something else. It was cold. It was controlled. It was like a mighty river moving silently under a thick sheet of ice. I took a slow, deep breath. I kept the timid smile plastered on my face. I let let Veronica keep talking, because that's what people like her do. They talk. They inflate their own egos. They show off. And the more they talk, the more they reveal their true selves. The more they expose the deep, hollow emptiness inside. Veronica took a sip from her glass of expensive red wine. She swirled it in her hand, pretending to be an expert. This wine is from an exclusive region in France, she announced. It costs $200 a bottle. But when you know quality, you don't skimp. She looked at me. Do you drink wine, Alara? Only on special occasions, I replied, and usually the cheapest one from the supermarket. I don't understand much about these things. Veronica's smile was a masterpiece of condescension. Oh, don't worry, she said, patting my hand as if I were a child. Not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience, with travel, with education. She gestured between herself and her husband. Franklin and I have visited vineyards all over Europe, South America, and California. We are quite knowledgeable. Franklin nodded in agreement. It's a hobby, he said, something we enjoy. Simone is learning too. He has good taste. She inherited it from us. He looked at his daughter with pride. Simone offered a weak, forced smile. Thanks, Mom. Veronica turned back to me. Her interrogation was not over. And you, Alara? Do you have any hobbies? Anything you enjoy doing in your free time? I shrugged, making myself seem small and uninteresting. I watch television. I cook. I walk in the park. Simple things. Veronica and Franklin exchanged another one of their looks. It was a look loaded with silent meaning. A look of shared judgment. How lovely, Veronica said, her voice syrupy sweet. Simple things have their charm too. Although of course one always aspires to more, doesn't one? To see the world. To experience new things. To grow culturally. But well, I understand not everyone has those opportunities. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said, my voice flat. Not everyone has those opportunities. Dessert arrived. The plates were decorated with more edible art. Veronica had ordered the most expensive option on the menu. It was a piece of cake the size of a cookie. It cost $30. This is delicious, she said after her first tiny bite. It has edible gold on top. Do you see those little golden flakes? It's a detail only the best restaurants offer. I ate my own dessert. It was simpler. Keeper. I ate in silence. Then Veronica's expression changed. She became serious, falsely maternal. You know, Alara, she began, I think it's important that we talk about something as a family, now that we are all here together. She looked around the table. Marcus tensed up immediately. Mom, he started. I don't think this is the right time. Veronica held up a hand, silencing him. Let me finish, son. This is important. She turned her full attention to me. Alara, I understand you did the best you could with Marcus. I know that raising him all by yourself wasn't easy, and I truly respect you for that. Her words were coated in sugar, but the poison was underneath. But now Marcus is at another stage in his life. He is married. He has responsibilities, and, well, Simone and he deserve to have stability. Stability? I asked softly. Yes, Veronica replied. Financial stability. Emotional stability. We have helped them a lot and we will continue to help. But we also believe it's important that Marcus doesn't have unnecessary burdens. Her meaning was crystal clear. He was calling me a burden. Me, his mother. Simone was staring at her plate so intently that it seemed she wanted to melt through it and disappear. Marcus's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching in his cheek. Burdens. I repeated the word, my voice a soft echo. Veronica let out a long, suffering sigh. I don't want to sound harsh, Alara, she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. But at your age, living alone with a limited salary, it's only natural for Marcus to worry about you. He feels that he must take care of you. And that's fine. He is a good son. She paused for effect. But we don't want that worry to affect his marriage. Do you understand what I'm saying? Perfectly, I replied. My voice was calm, but inside, the river of ice was beginning to crack. Veronica smiled, believing she had won. I'm so glad you understand. That's why we wanted to talk to you. Franklin and I have been thinking about something. She paused again, a master of dramatic timing. We could help you, financially. We could give you a small monthly allowance. Something that would allow you to live a little more comfortably. It would mean Marcus wouldn't have to worry so much. She waved a hand dismissively. Obviously, it would be a modest amount. We can't work miracles, but it would be a support. I remained utterly silent. I watched her. I waited. She continued. And in exchange, we would only ask for one small thing. We would ask that you respect Marcus and Simone's space, that you don't seek them out so much, that you don't put pressure on them, to give them the freedom they need to build their life together, without interference. She smiled. How does that sound? There was the offer. The bribe disguised as charity. They wanted to buy my silence. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my own son's life. They tried to remove me from the picture so I wouldn't embarrass their precious daughter with my poverty. Marcus exploded. Mom, that's enough. You don't have to. Veronica cut him off sharply. Marcus, calm down. We are talking like adults. Your mother understands. Don't you, Alara? I picked up my napkin from my lap. I calmly, slowly wiped my lips. I took a sip of water. I let the silence stretch out, growing heavier and more uncomfortable with each passing second. Everyone at the table was staring at me. Veronica with an expression of smug expectation. Franklin with a look of pure arrogance. Simone, her face a mask of shame. And Marcus, his eyes pleading with desperation. And then I spoke. My voice was different. It was no longer timid. It was no longer small. It was firm. It was clear. And it was cold as ice. That's a very interesting offer, Veronica, I said. Truly, very generous of you. Veronica smiled, a victorious glint in her eyes. I'm glad you see it that way. I nodded slowly. But I do have a few questions, just so I can understand the terms clearly. Veronica blinked, thrown off for a second. Of course, ask whatever you like. I leaned forward in my chair just slightly. How much exactly would you consider a modest monthly allowance? She hesitated. Well, we were thinking about $500. Maybe $700 depending on. I nodded again. I see. $700 a month for me to disappear from my son's life. Veronica frowned, her brow furrowing. I wouldn't put it like that. But that is exactly how you put it, I responded. My voice was flat. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Alara, I don't want you to misunderstand. We just want to help. Of course, I said. Help. Like you helped with the down payment on the house? How much was that again? Veronica puffed up with pride. $40,000 actually. $40,000. How generous. And the honeymoon? $15,000, she said. It was a 3-week trip through Europe. Incredible, I replied, my voice dripping with false admiration. So, you've invested about $55,000 into Marcus and Simone. Veronica smiled. Well, when you love your children, you don't hold back. I nodded slowly, holding her gaze. You're right. When you love your children, you don't hold back. But tell me something, Veronica. All that investment, all that money, did it buy you anything? She blinked, confused. What do you mean? I continued, my voice growing sharper. Did it buy you respect? Did it buy you real love? Or did it just buy you obedience? The atmosphere at the table changed in an instant. Veronica's smile vanished. Excuse me, you've spent this entire dinner talking about money, I said, my voice rising with controlled power. You've talked about how much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have, but you haven't asked me a single personal question. You haven't asked if I'm happy, something hurts me, if I ever feel lonely. You have only been calculating my worth, and apparently I am worth $700 a month. Veronica's face grew pale. I did not. Yes, you did. I interrupted her, my voice like steel. From the moment I arrived, you have been measuring my value with your wallet. And do you know what I've discovered tonight, Veronica? I've discovered that the people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand its true value. Franklin jumped in. I think you are misinterpreting my wife's intentions. I turned my gaze on him. It was cold and direct. And what were her intentions, Franklin? To treat me with pity all night? To humiliate me in front of my own son? To offer me alms so I would vanish from your perfect family picture? Franklin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus was as white as a sheet. Mom, please. I looked at my son. No, Marcus. Please don't. I am done being quiet. I placed my napkin neatly on the table. I leaned back in my chair. The timid, hunched posture was gone. I sat up straight. There was no more shrinking, no more pretending. I looked Veronica directly in the eyes. She held my gaze for a second, then her eyes darted away. She was uncomfortable. Something had changed, and she felt it. Everyone at the table thought it. Veronica, I began again, my voice now commanding the attention of the entire table. You said something very interesting a moment ago. You said you admire women who struggle alone, women who are brave. Veronica nodded slowly, her eyes wary. Yes, I did. Then let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled alone? Have you ever had to work for a living without your husband's money backing you up? Have you ever built something with your own 2 hands from nothing without the safety net of your family's wealth? Veronica stammered, caught off guard. I have my own achievements. Like what? I asked. My curiosity was genuine. Tell me. She fidgeted, adjusting her perfect hair. I manage our investments. I oversee our properties. I make important decisions in our businesses. I nodded slowly. Businesses your husband built. Properties you bought together. Investments made with the money he generated. Or am I mistaken? Franklin interjected, his voice sharp with annoyance. That's not fair. My wife works just as hard as I do. Of course. I replied calmly. I don't doubt for a second that she works, but there is a world of difference between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch. There's a difference between overseeing an empire you inherited and building it brick by painful brick, don't you think? Veronica pressed her lips together into a thin, hard line. I don't know where you are going with this, Elara. Let me explain, I said. 40 years ago I was 23 years old. I was a secretary at a small, unknown company. I earned minimum wage. I lived in a single rented room. I ate the cheapest food I could find, and I was alone, completely and utterly alone. Marcus stared at me, his eyes wide. I had never shared these details with him, not in this way. I continued, my voice steady and clear. One day I found out I was pregnant. The father, he disappeared. My own family turned their backs on me. I had a choice to make. I could give up or I could keep going. I chose to keep going. I worked until the very last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after Marcus was born. A kind neighbor took care of him during the day while I worked. I worked 12-hour days every day. I paused and took a sip of water. The table was silent. No one moved. I didn't stay as secretary, I went on. I studied at night. I took correspondence courses. I learned English at the public library, reading books until my eyes burned. I taught myself accounting, finance, business administration. I became an expert in things no one ever taught me. I did it all on my own, all while raising a child by myself, all while paying for rent and food and medicine and clothes. Veronica was no longer looking at me. She was staring at her plate, her arrogant facade beginning to crumble. And do you know what happened, Veronica? I asked. I climbed. Little by little, I went from secretary to assistant, from assistant to coordinator, from coordinator to manager, and from manager to director. It took me 20 years. 20 years of non-stop work. 20 years of sacrifices you can't even begin to imagine. But I did it. I leaned forward again. And do you know how much I earn now? Veronica just shook her head, speechless. $40,000. I said. A month. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if someone had hit a pause button on the entire universe. Marcus's fork clattered as it fell from his hand onto his plate. Simone's eyes were wide with disbelief. Franklin frowned, his face a mask of confusion. And Veronica, she just froze. Her mouth was slightly open. $40,000. I repeated, letting the words sink in. Every month, for almost 20 years. That's nearly $10 million in gross income over the course of my career. And that's not counting my investments. It's not counting my bonuses. And it's not counting my company's stock. Veronica blinked several times as if trying to reboot her brain. No, I don't understand. You earn $40,000 a month. That's right, I replied calmly. I am the regional director of operations for a multinational corporation. I oversee the company's business in 5 different countries. I manage budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars. I make decisions that affect the lives of more than 10,000 employees. I sign contracts that you couldn't even read without a team of lawyers. And I do it every single day. Marcus was pale. Mom, why did you never tell me? I looked at my son, and for the first time that night my expression softened. Because you didn't need to know, son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. I wanted you to become your own person, not just an heir. Because money corrupts, and I was not going to let it corrupt you. Simone finally spoke, her voice a whisper. But, then why do you live in that small apartment? Why do you wear such simple clothes? Why don't you drive a luxury car? I smiled, a genuine smile this time. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth isn't something you show off. Because I learned a long time ago that the more you have, the less you need to prove it. I turned my gaze back to Veronica. That's why I came here dressed like this tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor. That's why I acted like a broken, naive woman. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing to offer. I wanted to see your true colors. And boy, did I see them, Veronica. I saw them perfectly. Veronica's face was now a blotchy red. It was a mixture of shame, rage, and pure humiliation. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. If you earned that much money, we would know. Marcus would know. Why would he believe you were poor? Because I let him, I replied. Because I never talked about my job. Because I live simply. Because the money I earn, I invest. I save. I multiply it. I don't spend it on flashy jewelry or showing off in expensive restaurants. Franklin cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control. Even so, he said, his voice gruff, this doesn't change the fact that you were rude. You misinterpreted our intentions. Really? I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. I misinterpreted your intentions when you suggested I was a burden to my son? I misinterpreted when you offered to pay me $700 a month to disappear from his life? I misinterpreted every condescending comment about my clothes, my job, and my life. Franklin had no answer. Neither did Veronica. I stood up. My movements were slow and deliberate. Everyone at the table watched me. Let me tell you something that clearly no one has ever told you before, I said. Money does not buy you class. It does not buy you a real education. And it certainly does not buy you empathy. You have money, Veronica. Perhaps you have a lot of it, but you don't have a single ounce of what truly matters in this world. Veronica shot up from her chair, her face contorted with fury. And you do? You who lied and deceived us all night. You who made us all look like fools. I didn't make you look like fools, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. You took care of that all on your own. I just gave you the opportunity to show everyone who you really are. And you did it magnificently. Simone had tears streaming down her face. Mother-in-law, she whispered. I didn't know. I know. I interrupted her gently. You didn't know. But your parents, they knew exactly what they were doing. They knew they were humiliating me. And they were enjoying it. They enjoyed every second of it, right up until they discovered that the poor, simple woman they were scorning has more money than they do. And now they don't know what to do with that information. Veronica was trembling with rage. You have no right. I have every right, I replied firmly, because I am your son-in-law's mother. Because I deserve to be treated with respect. Not because of my money, not because of my job, but because I am a human being, a fact that you seem to have forgotten throughout this entire dinner. Marcus stood up and came to my side. Mom, please, let's just go. I looked at my son. Not yet, son. I'm not finished. I turned my gaze back to Veronica one last time. You offered to help me with $700 a month. Let me make you a counteroffer. I will give you $1 million, right now, in cash. If you can prove to me that you have ever in your entire life treated someone with kindness who didn't have any money to offer you in return. Veronica opened her mouth. She closed it. No words came out. Exactly, I said. You can't, because to you, people are only worth what they have in the bank. And that, Veronica, is the fundamental difference between you and me. I built my wealth. You just spend it. I earn my respect. You try to buy it. I have dignity. You just have bank accounts. I reached into my old frayed canvas tote bag. I pulled out my wallet. Inside, I found the black platinum credit card I used for corporate expenses. I dropped it on the table. It landed with a soft thud in front of Veronica. This is my corporate card, I said. It has an unlimited spending limit. Pay for the entire dinner with it. And please, leave a very generous tip for the staff. Consider it a gift from a broken, naive mother. Veronica stared at the card as if it were a poisonous snake. It was sleek and black. My name was engraved on it in silver letters. Elara Sterling, Regional Director. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached out and picked it up. She turned it over. She observed it. Then she looked at me. The superior shine in her eyes was gone. Now there was something different. Something I never thought I would see in her. There was fear. I don't need your money, she said, her voice broken. I know, I replied, but I didn't need your pity either. And yet you offered it to me all night long. So take it. Consider it a gesture of courtesy, of good manners, something you clearly didn't learn, despite all your fancy travels through Europe. Franklin slammed his hand gently on the table. Enough. This is getting out of control. You are disrespecting us. Respect. I repeated. How interesting that you choose to use that word now. Where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to live on? Where was it when she suggested I was a burden to my son? Where was it when she offered to buy my silence? Franklin clenched his jaw. Veronica was just trying to help. I corrected him. Veronica was trying to control. She wanted to make sure that the poor mother-in-law didn't ruin her daughter's perfect, pristine image. He wanted to eliminate the weak link in the chain. The problem is she chose the wrong link. I looked over at Simone. Her head was bowed. Her hands were twisting in her lap. She was trembling. Simone, I said softly. She looked up. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that my parents... Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted. Because you did know. Maybe you didn't know about my money, but you knew how your parents are. You know how they treat people they consider to be inferior. And you did nothing to stop them. Simone sobbed. I wanted to say something, but they're my parents. I know, I replied, and Marcus is my son, and yet I let him make his own decisions. I let him choose his own life, his own wife, his own path, because that is how you love someone. You love them with freedom, not with control, not with money, and not with manipulation. Marcus moved closer and put his arm around me. Mom, forgive me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Please forgive me for never asking, for assuming, for thinking you were. His voice cracked. I hugged him. You don't have anything to apologize for, son. I did what I did for a reason. I wanted you to be independent. I wanted you to value the right things. I didn't want you to depend on me financially. I wanted you to build your own life, but I made you feel like I had to protect you. Marcus said, his voice filled with regret. That I had to worry about you, that you were fragile. I know, I replied gently. And it wasn't wrong for you to think that, because that's how you learn to care for others. That's how you learn to be empathetic. Those are lessons that money can never buy. Marcus hugged me tighter. I'm so sorry. Veronica was still standing, rigid as a statue. She watched us with a mixture of confusion and barely contained rage. This doesn't change anything, she finally said, her voice strained. You lied. You deceived us. You came here with hidden intentions. You acted in bad faith. That's true. I nodded. I acted. I pretended to be something I'm not, which is exactly what you do every single day of your life. What is that supposed to mean? Franklin demanded. It means that you hide behind your money, I explained. You hide behind your jewels, your trips, and everything you can buy. But inside you are empty. You don't have deep conversations. You don't have real interest. You have nothing to offer the world beyond the numbers in your bank account. Veronica let out a dry, bitter laugh. Coming from someone who lied all night, that's pure hypocrisy. Perhaps, I replied, but my lie exposed the truth. It exposed your truth. And now you can't hide from it. Now you know that I saw you. I heard every comment. I stored every insult disguised as advice. And I will never ever forget it. The waiter approached our table timidly. Excuse me, he said. Would you like anything else? Franklin shook his head abruptly. Just the check. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Veronica sat back down, a look of defeat on her face. Her elegant posture was gone. She was slumped in her chair. She had just lost something important. And it wasn't money. It was power. Elara, she said, her voice softer now, less aggressive. I don't want this to ruin the relationship between our families. Marcus and Simone love each other. They have a life together. We can't let this. I interrupted her. Let this what, Veronica? Let this ruin your plans? Let this expose what you really think. It's too late for that. The damage is already done. But we can fix it, she insisted. We can start over. No, I cut her off firmly. We can't, because now I know who you are, and you know who I am, and that truth cannot be erased with empty apologies or fake smiles. You treated me like I was trash, and you did it with pleasure because you thought you could get away with it. Franklin cleared his throat. You were the one who came here lying. You provoked this entire situation. You're right, I nodded. I did provoke it. I provoked it because I needed to know. I needed to confirm what I already suspected. That you are not good people. That your money doesn't make you better human beings. That you are exactly the kind of people who despise others for not having the same things you do. Veronica wiped a tear from her eye. We are not bad people. Maybe not, I replied, but you are definitely not good. And there is a huge difference between those two things. The waiter returned with the check. He placed it in the center of the table. No one moved to touch it. Veronica looked at my black credit card still in her hand. Then she looked at me. I'm not going to use your card, she said. We will pay our own bill, as we always do. Perfect, I replied. Then keep the card as a souvenir. A reminder that not everything is as it seems. A reminder that the woman you scorned all night has more than you will ever have. I paused. And I'm not just talking about money. Veronica put the card down on the table with a sharp click. I don't want it, and I don't want your moral lectures either. I pushed it back towards her. Keep it anyway, because something tells me you might need it someday. You'll run into someone else like me, someone who pretends to be less than they are. And you'll make the same mistake all over again. Because people like you never learn. Franklin took out his wallet. It was made of expensive, exotic leather. He pulled out several credit cards. They were all gold, all shiny. He chose one and placed it on top of the check. The waiter took it and walked away. No one spoke during the minutes he was gone. The silence was thick, heavy, and deeply uncomfortable. Simone cried quietly into her napkin. Marcus held my hand under the table. Veronica stared at the wall. Franklin scrolled through his phone, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The waiter returned. He looked embarrassed. Sir, he said to Franklin, your card was declined. Franklin looked up abruptly. What? How was it declined? Declined, the waiter repeated. Do you have another form of payment? Franklin's face turned a dark shade of red. That's impossible. That card has an extremely high limit. It must be a system error. The waiter just shrugged. I can try it again if you like. Franklin handed him another card. The waiter left again. Veronica looked at her husband, her eyes wide with panic. What happened? I don't know, Franklin replied, his voice irritated. It must be a bank error. Maybe they froze the account for security. It happens sometimes when you travel. I nodded with feigned understanding. Of course, those things happen. How inconvenient. The waiter returned, looking even more uncomfortable than before. I'm very sorry, sir. This one was also declined. Franklin shot up from his chair. This is ridiculous. I'm calling the bank right now. He stormed out of the restaurant, his phone already pressed to his ear. Veronica remained seated, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. Her face was a mask of shame and utter humiliation. "This has never happened to us," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "Never." "What terrible timing," I commented, my own voice devoid of any emotion. Marcus looked at the check sitting on the table. "Mom, I can—" "No," I interrupted him firmly. "You are not paying for anything." I reached into my simple old leather wallet. I pulled out another card. This one wasn't black. It was a heavy, metallic card, almost transparent in appearance. It was a card that less than 1% of the people in the entire world possess. An invitation-only card for the ultra-wealthy. I placed it on the table directly in front of Veronica. She looked at it. Her eyes widened in recognition. She knew exactly what it was. "That's the Centurion card," she breathed. "That's right," I replied. "The American Express black card. Exclusive invitation only. You need to spend a minimum of $250,000 a year just to be considered. It has a $5,000 annual fee just for the privilege of having it, and it comes with benefits you can't even begin to imagine." Veronica said nothing. The waiter returned to the table. He took the card carefully, almost reverently, as if it were a holy relic. He was back in less than 2 minutes. "Thank you, Miss Sterling," he said, his voice filled with respect. "Everything is settled. Would you like the receipt?" "It's not necessary," I replied. The waiter nodded and left. Veronica continued to stare at the space on the table where the card had been. I stood up. I took my old wallet and my canvas tote bag. I looked at Veronica one last time. "The dinner was delicious," I said. "Thank you for the recommendation, and thank you for showing me exactly who you are. You saved me a lot of time, a lot of energy, and many, many future disappointments." Veronica finally looked up. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from a deep, contained rage. "This doesn't end here," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't just humiliate us and walk out of here as if nothing happened. Simone is our daughter. Marcus is our son-in-law. We will still be family. You will have to see us again." "You're right," I smiled. "I will have to see you. At birthdays, at Christmases, at family gatherings. But now I will see you differently. I will no longer have to wonder what you really think of me. I already know, and you will know that I know, and you will have to live with that knowledge for the rest of your lives." I let the words hang in the air. "Every time you see me, every time you pretend to be kind, every time you force a smile, you will remember this night." Franklin returned to the table. His phone was still in his hand. His face was pale. "There's a problem with the accounts," he said, his voice strained. "A temporary block. For security. They said it will be resolved tomorrow." He looked at the empty table. "Did they pay already?" "Yes," Veronica replied without looking at him. "She paid." Franklin's gaze shifted to me. His pride was shattered. "Thank you," he murmured. The words were barely audible. "You're welcome," I replied. "That's what family is for, isn't it? To help each other. Especially when someone needs a small allowance. Say $700. Or, in this case, the $800 that this dinner cost." Franklin closed his eyes, a look of pain on his face. Veronica clenched her fists in her lap. Marcus came to my side. "Mom, let's go. Please. It's enough." I looked at him. "You're right. It is enough." I turned my attention to Simone. She was still crying quietly. "Simone," I said softly. She lifted her head. "You are not to blame for how your parents are. No one chooses their family, but you do choose how you act. You choose how you treat other people, and you will choose how you raise your own children someday." Simone nodded through her tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "Don't apologize again," I told her. "Just learn. Learn that money does not define a person. Learn that humility is not a weakness. Learn that respecting other people costs nothing. And learn that if you are ever lucky enough to have children, teach them to see the heart of a person, not the size of their bank account." Simone sobbed harder. Marcus put a comforting arm around her. Veronica looked away, staring into the distance. Franklin was once again pretending to be busy with his phone. I headed for the exit. I took a few steps, then I stopped and turned around one last time. "Ah, Veronica," I said, "one more thing." She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. "Do you remember when you said you speak 4 languages? She frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious," I replied. "In which of those 4 languages did you learn to be kind? Because clearly it wasn't in any of them." Veronica opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Exactly," I said. "You can speak 100 different languages and still not have anything worth listening to." I walked out of the restaurant. Marcus was right beside me. The cool night air hit my face. I took a deep, cleansing breath. I felt as if a huge weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. Not a physical weight, but an emotional one. The weight of pretending, of tolerating, of keeping silent for far too long. Marcus took my arm gently. "Mom, are you okay?" "Perfectly fine," I replied, and I meant it. Better than ever. And you, Marcus? He sighed, a long, weary sound. I don't know. I'm processing everything. I can't believe you never told me. About your job, about your money, about everything you accomplished. I stopped walking and turned to face him. I looked him directly in the eyes. Does it bother you? He shook his head quickly. No, of course not. I'm proud. I'm incredibly proud. But I also feel foolish and blind. You are not foolish, I told him, my voice soft. You simply saw what I wanted you to see. And I did that on purpose. I needed you to grow up without depending on me. I needed you to grow up without feeling like you had a huge economic safety net waiting to catch you. I needed you to fight for things, to work hard, to value everything you achieved on your own. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. But now I also understand why you never complained, why you never asked for help, why you always seemed so calm. It's because you didn't need anything. I smiled. I needed many things, son. Only none of them could be bought with money. I needed to see you grow up. I needed to see you become a good man. I needed to see you make the right decisions. And I achieved that. Even marrying Simone? He asked, his voice weak. Even marrying Simone, I replied. She is not her parents. She can learn. She can change. But that will depend on her. And on you. It will depend on how you build your relationship from this day forward. It will depend on what values you both choose to follow. Marcus remained silent, thinking, processing. A taxi pulled up in front of us. I had called for a ride share as we were leaving the restaurant. I opened the door. Mom, can I ask you something? Marcus said, stopping me before I could get in. Of course. Why did you do it? Why did you come here tonight pretending to be poor? Why didn't you just tell them the truth from the very beginning? I closed the taxi door and turned back to him. Because I needed to know, son. I needed to confirm if my suspicions were correct. I needed to know if Simone's family was really the way I imagined them to be. And unfortunately, I was right. Marcus lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for them, I told him. But you do have to decide what kind of husband you want to be, and what kind of father you want to be someday. What do you mean? He asked. I mean that tonight you have seen two very different ways of handling money and power. You've seen your in-laws' way and you've seen mine. They use it to control, to humiliate, and to feel superior. I use it to have freedom, to help others without showing off, and to live a peaceful life. You have to decide which path you are going to follow. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. I opened the taxi door again and got in. I rolled down the window. Marcus came closer. Mom, one last question. Tell me, are you ever going to forgive Veronica and Franklin? I thought about it for a moment. Forgiving someone doesn't mean forgetting what they did, I replied. And it certainly doesn't mean allowing it to happen again. I might forgive them someday, when I see a real, genuine change in them. When they start seeing people as people and not as numbers in a bank account. But until then, I will simply be polite. I will be distant. And I will be extremely cautious. And me? Marcus asked, his voice small. Do you forgive me for not asking, for assuming, for allowing this dinner to happen in the first place? I looked at him with all the love in my heart. Son, there is nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right. You wanted your family to meet. That is a beautiful thing. What happened after that was not your fault. It was theirs, and maybe a little bit mine too, because I was the one who decided to play their game. Marcus smiled weakly. You won. I won. I nodded. But I don't feel victorious. I feel tired, and I feel sad, because tonight I confirmed something I didn't want to confirm, that some people will never change, that some families are broken even if they have all the money in the world, that there are voids inside people that no bank account can ever fill. The taxi driver cleared his throat. Ma'am, should we go? Yes, I replied. Give me 1 second. I looked at Marcus one last time. Go to Simone. Talk to her. Listen to her. Support her. But also be honest with her. Tell her how you felt tonight. Tell her what you expect from her family and from her from now on. Because if you don't establish boundaries now, this will happen again and again and again. I will, Marcus promised. I love you, Mom, and I mean it now more than ever, because now I know who you really are, and you are incredible. I smiled. I love you too, son. Always have, and I always will, no matter how much money I have or don't have, because love has no price, and that is a lesson that Veronica and Franklin will never, ever learn. Marcus stepped away from the taxi. I gave the driver a signal. The cab started to move. I looked out the window. I saw Marcus walking back towards the restaurant, his shoulders slumped, his head down in thought. He was going back to find Simone. He was going back to face his in-laws. He was going to have a challenging conversation, and I felt proud, because it meant he was maturing. He was learning. He was choosing to be a better man than the example he had just witnessed. The taxi sped through the brightly lit streets of the city. I closed my eyes. I thought about everything that had happened, every word, every look, every moment of tension, and I wondered if I had done the right thing. Suppose I had been too harsh, too cruel, too vengeful. But then I remembered every disguised insult, every condescending comment, every look of disdain, and I knew that no, I hadn't been any of those things. I had been honest,